Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends, and welcome to Miracles According to Spiritism. Every Sunday night, 6 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, we're conducting the study of the second part, Chapter 13. We're starting with Chapter 13 of Genesis. We're learning about miracles. Are there any miracles according to Spiritism? In the last week, we studied Chapter 13, and the subtitle was Spiritism Does Not Perform Miracles. Wow. And before we go into the summary from last week, I want to welcome you all. I see a number of people already. My name, your host, is Sunshine Beck from California, and I'm going to do a screen share because we're going to see that we can facilitate the study by having a visual as well. So let's see how we can do this. Okay. All right. So what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to check technology for a second to see whether you guys can actually see the program, because I have no other way of checking. So let us see whether this worked out. So yes, it looks like it is working. All right, good, perfect. All right, dear friends. So Chapter 13, Spiritism Does Not Perform Miracles. Today, we will be covering item 8 to 14. And last week, we covered item 4 to 13. So let us go here to the summary. So since it's one chapter, it's very important that we see the whole chapter. And we broke it into two pieces because the subject was too much. It's too dense. So last week, we learned that all those phenomena that for the longest time on earth fell into the categories of miracles because they couldn't be explained, were all of a sudden became clear, were explainable, thanks to Spiritism. Spiritism came along, and it revealed new laws that would now explain those unexplainable phenomena until then. And these phenomena are now falling under these laws. And we know from science, we know from the rest of life on Earth, that as soon as we have a law, the phenomena isn't miraculous anymore. The minute it can be explained, it is not a miracle anymore. The minute it can be duplicated, whether it's deliberately or not deliberately, it's not a miracle anymore. So these phenomena that needed explaining, there's many, of course. But one, of course, even just was that spirit exists. And spirits act on matter, on the material world. All of this was not known, and consequently was called a miracle whenever there was an expression of that nature. So then we also learned that we have two main principles on earth. One is the spiritual and the other one is the material principle. And both are subject to law. And of course, it's under God. It's under law of nature. Law of nature has one arm that deals with matter, namely the material principle, and those laws fall into the domain of science. And the other arm is the spiritual arm. It's the laws that deal with the spiritual principle. Spirits act on matter even after their discarnation, and they do that primarily via mediums. Now, you may say, well, only mediums? So what does that mean? Well, we also were reminded of the fact that we're all mediums. So spirits have a very strong influence on us, and they're using us pretty much 24/7, whether it's conscious to us or not. So that was revealed last week. So we need to be aware of that. Then the big question that we looked at was, so how can it be explained? How can it be that a table, for example, which falls under the law of gravity, can levitate, can be raised up off the ground without any visual hands touching it or raising it? So there we learned now, thanks to Spiritism, that a spirit combines a portion of the universal cosmic fluid, which we're surrounded in, we're swimming in, we're made out of. It's also called the divine plasma by André Louis in Evolution in Two Worlds. So the spirit combines a portion of that fluid with the fluid that gets emitted by a medium. And by doing that, focusing the will on moving the table moves. However, such a phenomena is short-lived. It's of course not for very long. So that's where we paused last week, and now we're going to go into item 8. So let us read, and if you want to follow along, we're on page 271 in the book Genesis. Because spirit phenomena exist as part of nature. Now that's important. Spirit phenomena fall under nature, under the law of nature, a natural law, I mean. So because spirit phenomena are part of nature, they have been produced throughout time. So they've always existed. But precisely because they could not be studied through the material means available to ordinary science, they remained for a much longer time than other phenomena within the realm of the supernatural, when Spiritism has now extracted them. So spirit phenomena are part of nature, and they've existed throughout time. However, these phenomena couldn't be measured because we couldn't see them, we couldn't touch them, we couldn't smell them. Our senses failed as far as those phenomena were concerned. And consequently, they were called miracles because they couldn't be measured through material means. But then Spiritism came along and changed that. Based on inexplicable appearances, the supernatural has free reign over the imagination, which wanders around in the unknown, giving rise to superstitious beliefs. And we know that from our own lives. If we can't see something, we can't explain it, then our fantasy starts rolling. But when we look at a table, there's not much fantasy we can have because we see it, we can touch it, it's a calcified image. But everything else is open to interpretation and to imagination. A rational explanation founded on the laws of nature brings people back down to the ground of reality, sets up a stopping point for the detours of the imagination, and destroys superstition. The minute reason gets engaged and it can be explained, so in other words, on some level it becomes more tangible, that's when we come back onto earth with our feet grounded and say, aha, so this is how it works. And then the miraculous disappears. Fantasy stops. Far from extending the realm of the supernatural, Spiritism restricts it to its farthest limits and takes away its last refuge. So Spiritism comes along and cuts through all the fantasies and the miracles and says, hey guys, look, this can be all explained. That's the bottom line. And it can be all explained by laws. Just like science, material science can explain phenomena. Now, Spiritism comes along and does the same thing. It explains, however, not the material principle, but the spiritual principle. So consequently, Spiritism restricts the realm of the supernatural. It becomes smaller. The more we can explain it, less and less phenomena are categorized as supernatural. And consequently, superstition goes out the window as well, because now we have spiritual laws. Spiritism demonstrates within the sphere of spirituality, just as science does within the sphere of materiality, what is possible and what is not. However, since it does not pretend to hold the final word on all things, not even those that are within its jurisdiction, Spiritism does not present itself as the absolute regulator of what is possible and takes into account knowledge that is reserved for the future. And this is what we like about Spiritism. Spiritism doesn't come along and says, hey guys, we have it all dialed in. Now we have all the answers in this universe for the spiritual principle, namely the spirit, all spirit phenomena, anything that's pertaining to spirits. We've seen in the Spirits book that so often Alan Kardec asks questions, and the spirits come back to humble us humans and say, well, we can't explain it. You can't know that yet. Just be happy with what we're giving you. So we know that we don't know everything yet. We know very little. And Spiritism does not pretend it knows it all. So that is very important for us. There's always more room for research, growth, and more laws. So now let us go to item 9. That completes, by the way, item 8. So now we're going to item 9. Spirit phenomena consist in the different modes of manifestation of the soul or spirit, whether during incarnation or in the errant state. So phenomena, spirit phenomena, those phenomena that we can't usually see, they manifest in different types. There's many different effects, and they're either happening during our incarnation. We're experiencing phenomena, like for example, the moving tables, or they happen in the errant state, which means that's the time the spirit spends between lifetimes, as long as we're on this evolutionary level. So there's many, in other words, there's many different spirit phenomena, and they're not only restricted to us incarnates, but they're also among the discarnates. And these spirit manifestations are the effects. Why are they the effects? Who is the cause of these spirit manifestations when we call spirit manifestations effects? The spirit. The spirit is the cause, and its manifestations is the effect. It is through spirit manifestations that the soul reveals its existence. Now, the terms soul and spirit are being used interchangeably here. We know from the Spirits book that Allan Kardec defined, with the help of the spirits, the term spirit is being used for a spirit that is discarnated. And the minute the spirit is in the flesh, like as I'm sitting here, as we're all around here on planet Earth, as soon as we're incarnated, the spirit is named soul. But it's one and the same thing. It's just in different envelopes, so to speak. All right? So let's go back to the sentence. It is through spirit manifestations that the spirit reveals its existence, its survival after death, and its individuality. So in other words, what they're saying, it is through these manifestations that we know that spirit exists. Because many people deny the existence of spirit. They deny the fact that we are spirits who are having an earthly experience, a material experience right now. So it's through these manifestations that we know that spirit exists, right? Because these tables were turning, just to use one example, and then Spiritism came along and looked behind it. And how did it all work? And we learned that last week. So through this process, it was found out that there's an intelligent principle behind it, because the table is not intelligent. So something had to will this table to move. And then it was found out it was a spirit, a spirit's will that was behind it. And it was found out that spirits indeed exist. A spirit is judged by its effects. Remember, effects are the spirit manifestations. And since the cause is natural, the effect is also not natural. We just said, what is the cause of the spirit manifestations? It's the spirit. Spirit is natural. Consequently, the effect of spirit have to be natural. Now we have both in the category of natural, both the spirit and its manifestations. The cause is spirit, its manifestations is the effect. It is these effects that comprise the special object of spiritist research and study. So I'm saying it again. It is these effects, these spirit effects, that comprise the special object of spiritist research and study, so as to arrive at as complete an understanding as possible concerning the nature and attributes of the soul, as well as the laws that govern the spiritual principle. So what is at the core of Spiritism, they're saying? It is the study and the research of the effects of spirit. It is these effects that comprise the special object of spiritist research and study, so that people can understand how this works, that spirit exists, that spirit manifestations are not miracles, and that new laws are being formed. So effects caused spiritist study. The effects, the spirit manifestations, are the focus of one of the main foci that Spiritism has, to understand it, to explain it, to bring new laws to mankind, to all of us. So let us go. Unfortunately, I can't right now see whether anyone has any questions, unless I go and pause and look at my phone for a second and see whether anyone posted a question. So far, one comment.
Pause and look at my phone for a second.
Okay, no questions yet. All right, great, guys. Let's move on to chapter 10. And I really warmly invite you to ask a question or add to it whatever you like to do, because it's nice to have it interactive. And I will check again on the phone whether something comes through. Item 10. To those who deny the existence of the independent spiritual principle, and consequently that of the individual and surviving soul, all nature is limited to tangible matter. So those who question the existence of spirit and its manifestations are materialists. They don't acknowledge the invisible. They don't acknowledge that spirit actually exists. All phenomena that are connected with spirituality are, from their point of view, those people who deny it, supernatural and consequently fantasy. Makes sense, right? If we can't acknowledge that there is a spirit and this table is moving, now it becomes a miracle, because we can't understand the cause behind the effect, namely the fact that the table is moving. Then we start swimming and it becomes a miracle. And in the past, before Spiritism came along, the majority of people wouldn't be able to see this or explain it and recognize that there is a spirit behind it. Consequently, a lot more miracles existed than today. By not accepting the cause, namely the spirit, they cannot accept the effect, namely the spirit manifestations, and they attribute them to imagination, namely the spirit manifestations are then called imaginations, illusions, or hallucination, and they refuse to delve into them. Hence, among them, the preconceived opinion that renders them incapable of judiciously appraising Spiritism, because they start from the principle of denying everything that is not matter. So nobody who only recognizes matter as the only existing thing on earth, those people will not be attracted to Spiritism, because the center of Spiritism's study is spirit, its phenomena, and how it works, how the mechanism works. How does spirit act on matter? So as long as the existence of the spiritual principle, namely spirit, which is the cause, is denied, the spirit manifestations, namely the effects, are miracles. That is item 10. So now we're moving on to item 11. From the fact that Spiritism accepts the effects that are the consequence of the existence of the soul. It does not follow that it accepts all the effects qualified as being extraordinary, or that it proposes to justify them and give them credibility. So in other words, not all effects are extraordinary or justifiable or credible. So there are some things that cannot be explained through Spiritism. Where are we? Credibility. Or that it is the champion of all dreamers, utopias. So, or that Spiritism is the champion of all dreamers, utopias, theoretical eccentricities, or miraculous legends. One would have to know very little about it to think this way. One would have to know very little about Spiritism to think this way. In other words, that things are fantastic, that what Spiritism deals with is incredible, and it's for dreamers and utopias and has theoretical eccentricities. So it's something extraordinary. That's not true. But the minute, that's only for the people who cannot recognize that there is a spiritual principle. It's those people who only see the material principle, matter, will feel this way. And we know that's not us. And hopefully it will be less and less people on earth who will feel this way and will be converting and realizing that spirits exist. One would have to know very little about it to think this way. Spiritism's adversaries think they have opposed it with an irrefutable argument when, after having done erudite studies on the convulsionaries of Saint Médard, the Camisards of Caen, or the nuns of Loudun, they discovered incontestable evidence of fraud. So what is he saying here? He's essentially giving us some examples which prove to the materialists that they're right. Because these three examples, I looked them up, I could only find one explained, pretty much were spirit phenomena which were fraud. So those who deny that the spiritual manifestations are real, they use those to bolster their argument. So he speaks about the convulsionaries of Saint Médard. That's one example, which I couldn't find any explanations for. Then he talks about another example, which is the Camisards of Caen. Camisards are French Protestants, and they were called the Huguenots. And then he talks, as the third example, he mentions the nuns of Loudun. And that was a demonic possession of nuns. So the materialists found evidence of fraud in those cases. But are such tales the gospel of Spiritism? Have its adherents ever denied that charlatanism has exploited certain incidents to its own advantage? That the imagination created them and that fanaticism has highly exaggerated them? So in other words, Spiritism doesn't condone that. It doesn't rule out that there are frauds. It is not liable, Spiritism is not liable for the extravagances committed in its name, any more than science is liable for the abuses of ignorance, or true religion for the excesses of fanaticism. So in other words, Spiritism cannot be held liable for charlatanism committed in its name, fraud, pretense. Just as much as science cannot be held liable for the abuses or the ignorance that happens, that are committed, or crimes that are committed in its name. It's not science that's liable, it's the individuals that are liable. That's essentially what he's saying here. Many critics have judged Spiritism based on fairy tales and popular legends, which are only fictions. It is the same as judging history based on historical romances or tragedies. So he's just building a case and saying that Spiritism is a legit spiritual science, but there are frauds, which Spiritism isn't condoning, and Spiritism can't be held liable for them either, just as science cannot be held liable for frauds taking place in its name. All right, that was item 11. Let's move on to item 12. Spirit phenomena are most often spontaneous. So let's take note of that. Spirit phenomena are most often spontaneous and are produced without any preconceived idea on the part of the persons who least think about them. Under certain circumstances, they can be precipitated, caused by agents known as mediums. So spirit phenomena are most often spontaneous. And under certain circumstances, these spirit phenomena can be precipitated, caused by mediums, which are the agents. Mediums are the interpreters of spirits. They're the intermediaries. In the former case, namely by, let's see, what is the former case? Under certain they can be by agent. So in these spontaneous phenomena, in the former case, namely the spontaneous phenomena, mediums are unconscious of what is produced through their intermediation. In the latter, they act with full knowledge of the fact. Hence, the distinction between conscious and unconscious mediums. We learn in the mediums book that there is basically two categories of mediums, either conscious or unconscious mediums. There is a third category that's like the semi-conscious mediums. They are the ones who have some recollection of what they said, did, or whatever was expressed, but not all of it. Semi-conscious, Alan Kardec calls them. But there's two main categories: those who have no recollection of what transpired through them, and then those who have complete faculties during the mediumship phenomena. So these spontaneous manifestations happen, generally speaking, through unconscious mediums. Okay, the latter are the most numerous. So the latter, again, they mean the unconscious mediums, are most numerous and are frequently found among the most obstinate disbelievers. Interesting. The ones that disbelieve that there is a spirit and that spirit can act on matter, they probably even deny the fact that they're mediums. It's exactly them that are sought out for these spontaneous spirit phenomena. So for this reason, spontaneous phenomena, okay, we're going back. The latter are the most numerous and are frequently found among the most obstinate disbelievers who thus practice Spiritism without realizing it or wanting to. So we have people who practice Spiritism, they don't even know it. They probably don't know that there's spirits, that there is a spirit, that they are a spirit. So the unconscious mediums are more common, and through them very often happen spontaneous spirit phenomena. For this reason, spontaneous phenomena are of crucial importance, because those who obtain them cannot be suspected of deceit. And that makes sense. If somebody isn't conscious of what they're doing and something happens, a spirit manifestation happens through them, then it is easy as proven that there was no fraud committed. However, if somebody is conscious, one could argue that they were the ones who massaged this phenomena to their advantage, or maybe they even conducted it fully, right? So it makes sense that, particularly during Alan Kardec's time, because today we don't concern ourselves with these questions so much anymore. We have to remember these books were written 150, 160 years ago, and this was new. Spiritism was brand new, and there were a lot of critics. So it was important for Alan Kardec to make it really clear that there weren't any frauds committed. All right. All right, so that's item 12. Now let us go to item 13. Okay, item 13. Oh no, this is the continuation of 12. I am sorry, guys. I'm sorry. We're continuing. Regardless of whether or not the phenomena are the result of an act of the will, the primary cause is exactly the same and in no way does it deviate from natural laws. So whether these phenomena are the result of an act of the will, which means from a spirit, the primary cause is exactly the same. In no way does it deviate from natural laws. So it's still not a miraculous incident, a spirit phenomena that is expressed that way. Therefore, mediums produce absolutely nothing supernatural. So whether they're conscious or unconscious, it still is not a miracle. The fact that the medium has no recollection or is not consciously participating even in many cases doesn't make it a supernatural event. Why? Because the laws are still the same. There is a cause, which is the spirit, the will of a spirit, and then there is an effect, and the effect is the spirit manifestation. Whether the intermediary is conscious of it or not, or whether the spirit is even conscious or not, doesn't matter. The mechanism falls under the same laws. Consequently, it's not supernatural. It's not a miracle. Consequently, so therefore, mediums produce absolutely nothing supernatural. Consequently, they perform no miracles. Mediums do not perform miracles. This is one of the pitfalls that we often have in Spiritism, and that is that we put mediums on a pedestal. We think they're endowed with supernatural powers. They're performing miracles, particularly in the realm of healing. And when we put somebody on a pedestal and we give them credit for something, we easily also then tear them down. And we're deeply disappointed and take it very personal that this person wasn't living up to the miraculous status we gave him or her. No, a medium is simply an interpreter, an intermediary. And here Ellen Kardec is very clear, and this is very important for us. So we're not going to run into this danger of putting mediums on a special level, on a pedestal, adoring them. They're so special because they're mediums. No, we're all mediums, and mediums do not perform any miracles. Mediums do not perform anything supernatural. Even instantaneous healings are no more miraculous than other effects. So instantaneous healings are no more miraculous than when this table is moving, because they are due to the action of a fluidic agent performing the role of a therapeutic agent, whose properties are no less natural for having been unknown until today. So instantaneous healings, which are the effect of spirit acting via a medium, are not miraculous. Why? Because they're based on an action on a fluidic agent. So something is being expressed into the fluidic agent, and that the fluidic agent becomes a therapeutic agent. It's the same thing that what we explained last week. How does a table move? Fluids are being combined. The spirit who wills the action, who is behind, who is the cause, pulls in the universal cosmic fluid and imbues the object with it. And then it takes the fluid of the medium as a helper fluid and imbues it with the table. And boom, here at the table levitates. Now let's imagine there is a sick person and a spirit healing doctor puts a certain specific energy into the fluid and expresses it, imbues the patient with it. And then it adds the fluid of a medium, and that's when The intention is on healing. The intention is to work together with God. The intention is good and from the heart, is prayerful. That's when healings, and of course, if it's correct for the spirit to experience the healing, which is something we can't judge. But in case a miraculous healing happens, God granted it. There is an explainable mechanism behind it. No miracles are performed there either, and certainly mediums didn't do that, did not perform a miracle. They were just the intermediaries, the agents. The miracle worker title given to certain mediums through criticism that is ignorant of the principles of Spiritism is thus completely improper. So to call mediums miracle workers, and he uses a foreign term, but it's really, the footnote says miracle workers, is completely improper. The characterization of miracle given by comparison to certain types of phenomena can only lead to error regarding its true character. So the characterization of miracle given by comparison to certain types of phenomena can only lead to error regarding its true character. What we need to remember in this item, the second half of item 12, is that mediums do not perform miracles. Instantaneous healings are not miraculous. They're based on certain laws. They're based on actions of fluid agents. And mediums are not miracle workers. That is the key for item 12. Now let's go to item 13. Let me check. Did anyone leave? No. Okay, guys, we're doing well. 13. The intervention of unseen intelligences in spirit phenomena do not render them any more miraculous than all the other phenomena caused by invisible agents, because the unseen beings who populate space are one of the forces of nature, a force whose action is as incessant upon the physical world as it is upon the moral world. So in other words, spirits are forces of nature. And that's the focus of Spiritism. The fact that unseen intelligences in the spirit phenomena create manifestations does not make it miraculous or more miraculous than other phenomena, because the unseen beings, namely the spirits who populate space, are one of the forces of nature. And if the cause is a force of nature, namely a spirit, we spirits are forces of nature, then the effects of the spirits are also natural. Consequently, not miraculous. By enlightening us about this force, Spiritism gives us the key to a multitude of matters inexplicable by any other means, and which might have passed as miracles on days gone by. So Spiritism comes along now and reveals laws which annul the idea of miracles, that miracles exist. Just like magnetism, Spiritism reveals a law, if not unknown, at least poorly understood. Or better stated, the effects are known because they have been produced throughout time. We've known the effects, the spirit manifestations. We've seen them all over, but we couldn't explain them and called them miracles. But now the effects are still the same, which helps because it's the known. And now Spiritism comes along and explains it. How wonderful. However, the law governing these effects, the law governing the effects has not been, and it is the ignorance of this law that has engendered superstition. So we're going to back up. The sentence is broken up. Just like magnetism, Spiritism reveals a law, if not unknown, at least poorly understood. Or better stated, the effects are known because they have been produced throughout time. However, the laws governing these effects has not been known. And it is the ignorance of this law that has engendered superstition. So we've known the effects, the spirit manifestations, but we didn't know that they were based on laws. And since we didn't know the laws, boom, it became superstitious and supernatural. Once this law became known, the extraordinary disappeared. Thus, spirits perform no more of a miracle by making a table turn or the dead right than doctors do when they bring a moribund back to life, or physicians when they make lightning hit. So there's no difference. The last two examples fall more into the material world. Those phenomena can be explained by now, but the spirit phenomena up until Spiritism couldn't be explained, but now they can. Those who, with the aid of this science, claim to perform miracles would be either an ignoramus about the matter or a charlatan. So in other words, spirits do not perform miracles. When tables are turned, when people get healed, whatever other form or manifestation it may take. And that is really important for us to know because there's laws behind it. So now we'll move on to item 14. Let's take a deep breath. No, it's a lot of information and we're whipping through it, but hopefully by repeating, Alan Kardec repeats it in different sentences and a little bit from different angles. And I'm repeating it, so I'm hoping that we're all letting it sink in and understanding at least the bare bones. And then we can go back and read the chapter by ourselves. And then I'm sure we'll get it. We'll increase our immortal wisdom. So item 14, this is the last item. Since Spiritism rejects all pretension of producing extraordinary things, are there miracles outside of Spiritism in the usual acceptation of the word? So, in other words, are there miracles outside of Spiritism? The answer. First of all, let us state that amongst all the supposedly miraculous events that occurred before the coming of Spiritism, and which still occur nowadays, most, if not all, find their explanation in the new laws that Spiritism has come to reveal. So most, if not all, so-called miraculous events that were coined miraculous before Spiritism came, are now being explained by the new laws that Spiritism created. These events, therefore, albeit under another name, are included in the order of spirit phenomena, and as such represent nothing supernatural. So in other words, events, spirit manifestation or manifestations outside of Spiritism can still be explained by these laws. So there's really no miracles there either. It is well understood that we're dealing only with authentic events and not those which under the label miracles are the product of despicable knavery aimed at exploiting gullibility. So in other words, Alan Kardec is only referring, Spiritism is only referring to true events, manifestations. Nothing that is actually unreal or is fraud. So we're not talking about fraud. So Alan Kardec is only talking about the real manifestations, the true manifestations. Nor are we referring to certain legendary events which could have some truth to them originally, but which superstition enlarged to the absurd. It is these particular events on which Spiritism has come to shed a light by furnishing the means for separating error from truth. So Spiritism is really serving a whole lot of good by finally, thanks to Alan Kardec, looking behind the so-called unseen, previously coined miraculous phenomena, which are spiritual phenomena, spirit manifestations. So he says, in other words, most, if not all, so-called miraculous events up until Spiritism are now explained by the new laws that Spiritism revealed. However, he's only referring to authentic spirit phenomena, nothing that is fake. So, dear friends, that comprises chapter Spiritism does not perform miracles. And now we really know that the realm of the miraculous, which was huge, the more we go back in history, the bigger the realm of the miracles was. Why? Because we knew less. Even within the realm of science didn't even exist for the longest time. Even in the realm of the physical manifestations, a lot of it was miraculous because it couldn't be explained. If somebody from, let's say, 150 years ago, if Alan Kardec came along and would see that we're shooting messages worldwide, instantaneously, that would not be explainable 150 years ago, or even less. So even though it is more tangible, it's linked to a phone or a computer, it would have been miraculous. So the more we know, the less the realm of miracles become. And then Spiritism, thank God, came along, thanks to Alan Kardec, and started to explain the laws that are behind spirit manifestations. In other words, the manifestations of spirit acting on matter. And of course, the funny thing is, spirit is acting on matter in every single human being walking on the earth. But I guess nobody thought about it at that point. And of course, if we do not recognize that there is a spirit, if we are totally hung up only on material things, on things, tangible items, then everything becomes miraculous again and wondrous, and our imagination goes crazy, right? But Spiritism brings us down and says, hey, look here, 1 and 1 is 2. This happens, and it continues throughout the realm of spirit manifestations. We have a spiritual principle. We have spirit as the cause behind the spirit manifestations, with a medium in the middle, whether it's a conscious or unconscious medium. Doesn't matter. And let us remember, we're all mediums to varying degrees. So let us stop sharing. All right, friends, here we are. So let us pray for a moment in gratitude. Let us connect. Let us connect with God. And if you can, we're inviting you to close your eyes. And we're taking a deep breath. Dear God, dear Jesus, it is with great gratitude that we are gathering tonight for these amazing studies that Alan Kardec, who we are so grateful to for his diligent, intelligent work, has helped us to understanding new laws that explain the so far unexplainable, explaining miracles, opening a totally new world to us. Thank you for making it so clear, with the help of the spirits on high, of how spirit manifestations mechanism actually works. And we're grateful that we're having this opportunity to study Genesis on Kardec Radio, because we know that this study too is nourishing our souls. We are increasing our immortal wisdom, helping us to increase our knowledge, which will also help us ultimately in our desire to serve, since we are all mediums on this planet. Our goal is to make ourselves useful for the greater good, always looking to be of service, and knowing how common spirit manifestations are on planet Earth and beyond. It also helps us to become more conscious of spirits surrounding us, paying attention to the type of spirits who we are attracting based on the law of cause and effect, the law of affinity. What we're thinking and feeling, we're emitting, and what we're emitting, we surely are attracting. And understanding all these laws and mechanisms increasingly better will help us, does help us to navigate the vicissitudes of life better. Always feeling good, the good, visualizing the good, manifesting the good, molding the good, thinking the good, with all the resources that we have at hand. Thank you for this divine opportunity, and so be it. Thank you, dear friends, for this beautiful study, and thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions that come to mind, please feel free to post them, and we'll go back and we'll make sure we'll answer them. Or if you have any other comments. So God willing, we will meet again next week, same time, same place, with the continuation of our study. And next week, we will be continuing on to chapter item 15, which starts with, does God perform miracles? So that will be the next chapter we will be studying. Does God perform miracles? Wow, we can't wait. God bless you. Goodbye, friends.